Janitor bets career he can fix jet in 1 hour. Billionaire owner shocked at his skill. 60 minutes, Raymond Nichols said, his weathered hands steady despite the gravity of what he was proposing. Give me 1 hour with that jet, and if I can't fix what your mechanics couldn't figure out in 3 days, I'll hand in my resignation. The hangar fell silent. The billionaire's security detail exchanged glances, while Elijah Crane, owner of Crane Industries and the $65 million Gulfstream G650 that sat dormant behind them, narrowed his eyes at the maintenance worker standing before him in faded blue coveralls. "You're the janitor," Crane said flatly, more statement than question. His Italian loafers gleamed under the harsh hangar lights, a stark contrast to Raymond's scuffed work boots. "I'm a maintenance engineer for your facility, sir," Raymond replied, keeping his voice level despite the hammering in his chest. "And yes, part of my job includes keeping the floors clean." Crane checked his watch, a timepiece worth more than Raymond's annual salary, then looked at the useless jet that was supposed to have him in Tokyo 12 hours ago. The best aviation mechanics money can buy have been crawling over that plane for days. You think you can succeed where they failed? His voice carried the imperious tone of a man unaccustomed to having his time wasted. Behind Crane stood his teenage daughter, Olivia, rolling her eyes as she tapped furiously on her phone, and his chief of operations, Victoria Harlow, whose pinched expression suggested this unscheduled delay was costing millions. Raymond hadn't planned this confrontation. Been quietly completing his shift, pushing his mop past the frustrated mechanics when he'd overheard their conversation about the baffling electrical issue grounding the jet. Something in their description had triggered a memory, a nearly identical problem he'd encountered decades ago in another life. 1 hour, Raymond repeated. "That's all I'm asking." Crane's eyes flicked toward the wall clock, then back to Raymond. "If you're wrong, you're not just resigning, you're done in this industry. I'll make sure of it." Raymond nodded once. He knew the stakes. At 58 with no college degree and a resume gap that raised too many questions, another job would be nearly impossible to find. "The clock starts now," Crane said. And just like that, Raymond was walking toward the aircraft that would either salvage or destroy what remained of his life. No one watching him climb the boarding stairs knew that 30 years earlier, Raymond Nichols had been one of the most gifted aviation engineers in the military, with an intuitive understanding of aircraft that his superiors had called preternatural. No one knew about the classified project that had gone catastrophically wrong, the scapegoating that followed, or the dishonorable discharge that had erased his credentials. No one knew how a man who once designed cutting-edge aircraft systems had ended up pushing a mop through the same hangars where his brilliance might have been revered. No one, that is, except Raymond himself. And as he entered the luxury jet, he allowed himself a small smile. It had been a long time since he'd felt the familiar surge of confidence that came with knowing, truly knowing, how to solve a problem that had stumped everyone else. The clock was ticking. 3 days earlier, Raymond had been buffing the expansive marble floors of Crane Industries' executive wing when Elijah Crane had stormed through the lobby, barking orders into his phone. Raymond had lowered his eyes as he always did when executives passed, a habit born from years of making himself invisible. But that day, Crane had stopped abruptly, causing Raymond to nearly collide with him. "Watch it," Crane had snapped, barely glancing at Raymond before returning to his call. "No, not you, Harrison. I'm talking to never mind. What do you mean the jet isn't ready? I have to be in Tokyo by Wednesday morning. The Nakamura deal doesn't happen without me there in person." Raymond had mumbled an apology and steered his buffer away, but not before catching the rest of Crane's conversation. Something about an electrical system malfunction that had the mechanics stumped. Raymond had felt a twinge of recognition at the symptoms Crane described to his head of maintenance over the phone. Now, as Raymond climbed aboard the Gulfstream, those details crystallized in his mind. The intermittent power fluctuations, the navigation system glitches, the way the problem seemed to vanish during diagnostics only to reappear when the engines were running. It all pointed to something the mechanics were likely overlooking. The jet's interior was opulent, all cream leather, polished wood, and subtle lighting, but Raymond barely noticed as he made his way to the cockpit. He settled into the pilot's seat, his hands hovering over the controls with the hesitation of someone returning to a former lover after decades apart. Outside, through the cockpit window, he could see Crane watching him with arms crossed, skepticism etched into every line of his face. Beside him, his daughter had finally looked up from her phone, curiosity replacing boredom in her expression. Several mechanics hovered nearby, their postures communicating a mixture of resentment and morbid curiosity. Raymond took a deep breath, then began his methodical inspection. He started the auxiliary power unit and watched the displays flicker to life, his eyes darting from gauge to gauge. Everything looked normal, which was exactly the problem. The issue wouldn't manifest in standard diagnostics. For 20 minutes, he worked in silence, removing panels, tracing wiring paths, checking connections. His movements grew more confident with each passing minute, muscle memory returning like an old friend. This was the language his hands had always spoken most fluently, even after all these years. 40 minutes remained when Raymond first suspected he'd found the culprit. 35 minutes remained when he confirmed it. A modification to the avionics system, a custom upgrade Crane had presumably ordered, had been improperly integrated with the original wiring. The connection point was hidden behind 3 other systems, nearly impossible to spot unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Under certain conditions, it created a subtle power drain that cascaded through multiple systems, manifesting as seemingly unrelated problems. Raymond's heart raced as he carefully disconnected the faulty integration, reconfigured the wiring, and created a bypass that would restore full functionality. It wasn't a permanent solution that would require replacing components, but it would get the jet safely to Tokyo and back. With 15 minutes to spare, Raymond closed the last panel and made his way back to the cabin. He systematically checked each system, watching with quiet satisfaction as everything responded normally. No fluctuations, no glitches. He exited the aircraft with 7 minutes left on the clock. The small crowd that had gathered fell silent as he descended the stairs, his face betraying nothing. Crane stepped forward. "Well, try it now," Raymond said simply. The head mechanic looked to Crane, who nodded. 2 mechanics hurried aboard while Raymond stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the hangar floor. The minutes stretched painfully as the engines started, diagnostics were run, and systems were checked. When the lead mechanic emerged, his expression told Raymond everything he needed to know. "It's working perfectly," the man announced, not bothering to hide his astonishment. "Whatever he did, it fixed the problem." All eyes turned to Raymond, who finally allowed himself to meet Crane's gaze. "How?" Crane demanded, genuine curiosity breaking through his usually impassive demeanor. The custom entertainment system integration was creating feedback in the avionics bus during specific power load scenarios, Raymond explained, knowing the technical details would mean little to Crane. "I created a bypass that isolates the systems. You'll want to replace the integration module when you return, but this will get you to Tokyo without issues." A heavy silence followed. Raymond could see the calculations happening behind Crane's eyes, reassessing the man who had been invisible to him until today. "Where did you learn to do that?" Crane finally asked. Raymond hesitated. The truth was complicated, painful, and not something he shared, but something in Crane's expression, a newfound respect, perhaps loosened the knot of caution that had bound Raymond's past for decades. "I used to design systems like these," he said simply. "A long time ago." "For who?" "That's classified," Raymond replied with the ghost of a smile. Crane stared at him for a long moment, then did something completely unexpected. He laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed his severe features. "Victoria," he called to his operations chief. "Find out who this man really is and then come up with a new position for him, something that doesn't involve a mop." And just like that, the life Raymond Nichols had carefully constructed began to unravel. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more captivating narratives like this one. Now, let's continue with Raymond's journey. Victoria Harlow prided herself on thoroughness. When Elijah Crane tasked her with investigating Raymond Nichols, she approached it with the same methodical precision she applied to acquisitions and mergers. Background checks, employment verification, military record requests. She deployed the full arsenal of corporate intelligence gathering. Which was why, 48 hours after the jet incident, she found herself staring at her computer screen with uncharacteristic bewilderment. Raymond Nichols, for all practical purposes, didn't exist before 12 years ago. The maintenance worker had appeared out of nowhere, with vague references and a spotty employment history that raised more questions than it answered. His military record was a dead end, classified beyond even her considerable reach. The few documents she did unearth contained more redactions than actual information. Victoria was preparing to deliver this unsatisfying report to Crane when a call came through on her secure line. The voice on the other end belonged to a former colleague who now worked for a defense contractor with government connections. "I'd stop digging if I were you," the man advised without preamble. The name Raymond Nichols has flagged some serious attention. Whatever your interest is in him, it might be healthier to let it go. Victoria, not easily intimidated, pressed for more information. Her contact's reluctance only intensified her curiosity, but he would only add one cryptic detail before ending the call. Project Blackwing, that's all I can say. When Victoria finally entered Crane's office later that afternoon, she found him uncharacteristically distracted, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the distant airfield where Raymond had performed his miracle 3 days earlier. "Sir, about Raymond Nichols," she began, setting her tablet on his desk. "There are some inconsistencies in his background that—" "He started work in the engineering department this morning," Crane interrupted, still gazing out the window. "I moved him there myself." Victoria blinked in surprise. Crane never involved himself in mid-level staffing decisions. "Without waiting for my report, what did you find?" Crane finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Almost nothing," Victoria admitted. "His background is essentially blank before 12 years ago. Military records are classified, and I received a rather concerning call suggesting we drop the investigation entirely." She expected Crane to be troubled by this revelation. Instead, a look of satisfaction crossed his face. "Perfect," he said. "I'm sorry. Victoria, I've built a multi-billion-dollar company by recognizing value others miss," Crane said, returning to his desk. "That man solved in 1 hour what an entire team of specialists couldn't figure out in 3 days. I don't care if he's running from something. I care what he can do for Crane Industries." Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, there's something called Project Blackwing that might be connected to him. I don't know what it is, but the mere mention of it made my contact nervous." For the briefest moment, something flickered across Crane's face, recognition, perhaps, but it vanished so quickly Victoria couldn't be certain. "Thank you for your diligence," Crane said, effectively dismissing the subject. "Now about the Nakamura contract." The meeting proceeded as normal, but Victoria left with the distinct impression that Elijah Crane knew more about Raymond Nichols than he was letting on. The question was, why would one of the world's wealthiest men take a personal interest in an enigmatic janitor? Raymond's first day in the engineering department was a study in uncomfortable transitions. The same people who had barely acknowledged his existence for years now regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. His new workspace, a desk in the open-concept engineering floor rather than a custodial closet, felt exposed, vulnerable. During the morning briefing, the department head, Dr. Wesley Chen, introduced Raymond with obvious reluctance. "Mr. Nichols will be joining us as a special consultant on the G650 systems integration," Dr. Chen announced, his tone suggesting this arrangement had been forced upon him. "Mr. Crane has personally requested his involvement." The room's reaction was immediate. Raised eyebrows, exchanged glances, barely concealed skepticism. Raymond recognized the look. He'd seen it decades ago when he'd first joined the military's elite engineering program, a 22-year-old prodigy without the pedigree his colleagues possessed. A young engineer named Marcus leaned over during Dr. Chen's presentation. "So what's your background? MIT? Stanford?" "Self-taught," Raymond replied quietly, earning a disbelieving snort from Marcus. "Right." "And I'm self-taught brain surgery," Marcus whispered back. "Seriously, how does a janitor end up here?" Raymond offered no response, focusing instead on Dr. Chen's overview of the department's current projects. One in particular caught his attention: the integration of a new proprietary navigation system across Crane's fleet of private aircraft. Something about the specifications triggered a warning bell in Raymond's mind, but before he could analyze why, Dr. Chen was assigning teams. "Marcus, you'll head up the firmware implementation. Take Johnson and Patel with you," Dr. Chen said, then hesitated as his eyes fell on Raymond. "Nichols, you can. Observe for now, familiarize yourself with our protocols." It was a polite way of sidelining him, and Raymond accepted it without complaint. He'd earned his place once before, he could do it again. As the meeting dispersed, Raymond found himself face-to-face with Dr. Chen, whose professional smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Crane may have been impressed by your quick fix, but engineering is about methodical process, not tricks," Dr. Chen said quietly. "This is a highly technical environment. If you find yourself overwhelmed, there's no shame in returning to maintenance." Raymond met the man's gaze steadily. "I appreciate your concern, Dr. Chen. I'll keep that in mind." Throughout the day, Raymond moved quietly through the department, absorbing information, studying diagrams, and listening to discussions without inserting himself. It was a strategy he'd employed throughout his life. Watch, learn, understand the ecosystem before disrupting it. By late afternoon, he had gained a comprehensive understanding of the navigation system project, including aspects the team seemed to be overlooking. When he finally spoke up during a troubleshooting session, the room fell silent. "You're approaching this from the wrong angle," Raymond said, pointing to the schematic displayed on the conference room screen. "The interference isn't coming from the hardware integration, it's a frequency conflict in the software layer." Marcus laughed. "With all due respect to our new colleague, that's impossible. The software architecture specifically prevents cross-frequency contamination." "In theory," Raymond agreed. "But your base configuration is built on the Hartman platform, which has a documented vulnerability when processing certain bands of satellite data." The room fell silent again, this time with a different quality. Dr. Chen slowly set down his tablet. "How do you know we're using Hartman architecture? That information isn't in any of the materials you've been given today." Raymond realized his mistake immediately. He'd recognized the architecture from the code fragments he'd seen on various screens throughout the day, a pattern recognition that came naturally to him but would seem impossible to others. "I saw reference to it in the system logs," he improvised, knowing the explanation was weak. Dr. Chen's eyes narrowed. "Those logs are encrypted." The tension in the room was palpable now. Raymond had revealed too much knowledge too quickly, breaking his own rule of careful integration. Before he could formulate a response, a new voice cut through the silence. "Is he right about the frequency conflict?" All heads turned toward the doorway where Elijah Crane stood with his daughter Olivia, who looked supremely bored by the proceedings. Dr. Chen straightened immediately. "Mr. Crane, we weren't expecting you. We're just having a technical discussion about." "Is he right?" Crane repeated, stepping into the room. An uncomfortable silence followed before Marcus reluctantly spoke up. "We haven't verified his theory yet." "Then verify it," Crane commanded. "Now." The next 15 minutes were excruciating as the team ran diagnostics that Raymond knew would ultimately prove him correct. He sat quietly, aware of Crane's evaluating gaze and the growing discomfort of his new colleagues. When the results appeared on the screen, Dr. Chen's face went through a fascinating progression of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and finally, grudging acceptance. "It appears Mr. Nichols was correct," he admitted. "There is a frequency conflict in the Hartman architecture that our testing didn't catch." Crane nodded as if this confirmed something he already suspected. "Fix it," he said simply, then turned to leave before pausing at the door. "Raymond, join me for dinner tonight, 7 o'clock at the Meridian. Victoria will text you the details." It wasn't a request. As Crane departed with his perpetually disinterested daughter in tow, Raymond became acutely aware of the stares from everyone in the room. In a single day, he'd gone from invisible janitor to dinner guest of Elijah Crane. The narrative of his carefully constructed life was veering dangerously off script, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a warning sounded. Project Blackwing had been buried for almost 3 decades. If it resurfaced now, the consequences would extend far beyond his employment at Crane Industries. For the first time since he'd impulsively offered to fix the jet, Raymond wondered if he'd made a catastrophic mistake. The Meridian occupied the top floor of downtown's tallest building, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't bother with a sign. Raymond felt conspicuously out of place as the elevator whisked him upward. His department store suited a poor disguise among the city's elite. He debated not coming at all, but curiosity and perhaps a touch of vanity at being recognized for his abilities after so long had won out. The maitre d' greeted him with a practiced smile that faltered slightly upon assessing Raymond's attire. "Your name, sir?" "Raymond Nichols. I'm meeting Elijah Crane." The change in the man's demeanor was immediate. "Of course, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Crane is expecting you. Please follow me." Raymond was led through the dimly lit restaurant, past tables of financiers, celebrities, and power brokers, to a private dining room with a spectacular view of the city skyline. Crane sat alone at a table set for 2, studying a tablet that he set aside when Raymond entered. "Right on time," Crane observed, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I appreciate punctuality." Raymond sat, noting that Crane had already ordered wine for both of them. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Crane, though I'm not sure I understand the purpose." Crane smiled slightly. "Direct, I like that." He took a sip of his wine. "Tell me, Raymond, do you know what the most valuable commodity in today's world is?" "I'd imagine you'd say information, sir." "Close, it's specialized knowledge, the kind that can't be Googled or taught in universities, the kind that comes from experience, intuition, and natural talent." Crane leaned forward. "The kind you demonstrated on my jet and again today in the engineering department." Raymond accepted the glass of wine but didn't drink. I've worked with aircraft systems before. Yes, I'm aware, Crane said, his eyes never leaving Raymond's face. What I'm curious about is why a man with your abilities has been pushing a mop in my company for the past 3 years. Raymond had prepared for this question, but now faced with Crane's penetrating gaze, his carefully constructed explanation felt flimsy. Life takes unexpected turns, Mr. Crane. Sometimes starting over is the only option. Crane sat back unconvinced. Victoria couldn't find much about your past. Military records classified, employment history spotty at best. It's as if Raymond Nichols emerged from the ether 12 years ago. Raymond's pulse quickened. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. Crane studied him for a moment longer before continuing. Does the name Admiral James Westbrook mean anything to you? The question hit Raymond like a physical blow. Admiral Westbrook had been the head of Project Blackwing, the man who had once championed Raymond's career before ultimately sacrificing him to protect the project. Raymond kept his expression neutral, but his silence was answer enough. I thought so, Crane said with satisfaction. Admiral Westbrook sits on my company's Defense Division Advisory Board. When I mentioned your name this morning, he had a very interesting reaction. The room seemed to tilt slightly as Raymond processed this information. If Westbrook knew he was here working under his real name. What do you want from me, Mr. Crane? Raymond asked, abandoning pretense. Crane smiled, evidently pleased to have broken through Raymond's reserve. Initially, I wanted to understand how my janitor could fix a problem that stumped my best engineers. Now, I want to know if the man sitting across from me is the same Raymond Nichols who designed the Blackwing prototype before disappearing after the Tehran incident. The Tehran incident. 3 words that encapsulated the worst failure of Raymond's life. A classified operation that had gone catastrophically wrong, resulting in the deaths of 3 pilots and the end of Raymond's military career. That's classified information, Mr. Crane, Raymond said carefully. Even discussing it could be considered a breach of national security. Please, Crane scoffed. The statute of limitations on that security clearance expired years ago. Besides, my defense contracts give me access to information most civilians couldn't dream of. He leaned forward again. What interests me isn't the failure, Raymond. It's what you were trying to achieve. The Blackwing navigation system was decades ahead of its time, at least the theoretical aspects I've been allowed to see. Raymond remained silent, weighing his options. The truth could end the fragile new beginning he'd created, but Crane clearly knew enough to make denials pointless. Yes, Raymond finally admitted. I designed the Blackwing prototype, but that project died with the Tehran incident. Did it? Crane asked with a knowing look. Because my engineers are working on a navigation system with remarkable similarities to what you were developing 30 years ago, technology that's only now becoming feasible. The implication was clear, and it sent a chill through Raymond. If Crane Industries was reviving aspects of Project Blackwing. The system failed, Mr. Crane, Raymond said firmly. 3 pilots died because of fundamental flaws in the design, flaws I discovered too late. Or flaws that someone else introduced, Crane suggested casually, taking another sip of his wine. Someone who understood enough about your work to sabotage it effectively. Raymond stared at Crane, old suspicions suddenly resurfacing. He'd always questioned the official explanation for the Tehran failure, but in the chaos of his discharge and the years of rebuilding that followed, he'd buried those doubts. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Crane said, that your career was derailed by something more deliberate than equipment failure, and I'm offering you a chance to finish what you started 3 decades ago. Before Raymond could respond, the door to the private dining room opened, and Olivia Crane entered, still engrossed in her phone. Dad, Marissa needs your approval on the Tokyo follow-up, she said without looking up. Then, noticing Raymond, she paused. Oh, you're the janitor who fixed the plane. Olivia, Crane said with a hint of impatience, this is a private business dinner. Whatever, she rolled her eyes. Mom's blowing up my phone asking when you'll be home, something about the benefit tomorrow night. Crane sighed. Tell her I'll call shortly. As Olivia left, he turned back to Raymond with an apologetic smile. Teenagers, even billionaires aren't immune to their disruptions. Raymond nodded, grateful for the interruption that had given him time to collect his thoughts. Mr. Crane, I appreciate your interest in my past work, but I left that life behind for good reasons. I'm not looking to revisit it. Aren't you? Crane challenged. A man with your gifts doesn't just accept obscurity without reason. Whatever drove you into hiding, fear, guilt, self-punishment, isn't it time to move beyond it? Think of what you could accomplish with Crane Industries' resources behind you. The offer was tempting in ways Raymond hadn't anticipated. For years, he'd suppressed the part of himself that thrived on solving complex problems, on pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The past 3 days had awakened that dormant passion. But Raymond also knew the dangers. Project Blackwing had been terminated for reasons beyond the Terran failure, ethical concerns about its potential applications, political pressures from agencies that saw it as a threat to established power structures. "I need time to consider what you're proposing," Raymond said finally. Crane nodded, seemingly satisfied with this small victory. "Take all the time you need. In the meantime, you'll continue working in the engineering department," he smiled. "Though perhaps we can find you a better suit." As Raymond left the Meridian an hour later, his mind was churning with possibilities and warnings in equal measure. Stepping into the cool night air, he was so distracted that he nearly collided with a woman waiting for the valet. "Excuse me," he mumbled, stepping aside. "Raymond Nichols," the woman said, causing him to freeze. "I was hoping to catch you." Raymond turned to find Victoria Harlow, Crane's operations chief, watching him with an unreadable expression. "Ms. Harlow," he acknowledged cautiously. "Were you waiting for me?" "I was," she confirmed. "Something you should know before you make any decisions about Elijah's offer." "How did you—" "I know Elijah Crane better than most," she interrupted, "and I know when he wants something badly enough to arrange a private dinner at his favorite restaurant." Raymond studied her carefully. Victoria Harlow had the reputation of being Crane's most loyal executive, his right hand in all business matters. Her apparent concern didn't align with that image. "Why would you warn me about your boss's intentions?" he asked. Victoria glanced around before stepping closer. "Because I've seen what happens to people who know too much about Crane Industries' defense projects. And because Project Blackwing isn't just being revived, Raymond. It's being weaponized." If you're finding this story intriguing, please subscribe to our channel and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We appreciate your support as we continue Raymond's story. The following morning, Raymond arrived at work earlier than usual, his conversation with Victoria Harlow replaying in his mind. She hadn't elaborated on her cryptic warning, instead handing him a secured flash drive with instructions to view its contents alone and then destroy it. The engineering floor was deserted at 6:30 a.m., giving Raymond the privacy he needed. He plugged the drive into his workstation and entered the password Victoria had provided. A single video file appeared on the screen. The footage was from a test facility Raymond didn't recognize: sterile white walls, observation windows, and what appeared to be a modified version of the navigation system his new colleagues were working on. As he watched, the system activated, guiding a drone through a complex series of maneuvers that should have been impossible given current technology. Then something went wrong. The drone's movements became erratic, its navigation system seemingly possessed by some rogue intelligence. It veered off course, crashing through a security barrier and into the observation room where several engineers scrambled for cover. The video ended abruptly, but not before Raymond glimpsed something that made his blood run cold. The navigation display showed a familiar error code, the same one that had preceded the Tehran incident 30 years ago. Raymond ejected the drive and pocketed it, his mind racing. If Crane Industries was experiencing the same critical failure that had doomed Project Blackwing, it confirmed his long-held suspicion. The flaw wasn't in his original design but had been introduced somehow, deliberately or accidentally, during implementation. "Early bird gets the worm, huh?" Raymond turned to find Marcus standing in the doorway, coffee in hand, regarding him with suspicious curiosity. "Just trying to catch up on the systems I'll be working with," Raymond replied, closing his session. Marcus approached, setting his coffee down on a nearby desk. "You know, I did some digging last night, tried to find out where you studied your previous work, came up empty." He leaned against the desk, studying Raymond. "It's like you materialized out of thin air." "I prefer to let my work speak for itself," Raymond said, meeting the younger man's gaze without flinching. "That's just it," Marcus continued. "Your work yesterday spoke volumes. That Hartman architecture vulnerability, it's not public knowledge, it's not even widely known within the industry." He lowered his voice. "So either you're psychic or you've worked with these systems at a level even I haven't been cleared for." Raymond recognized the shift in Marcus's demeanor, from dismissive to cautiously respectful. It was an opening, and given what he'd just seen on Victoria's drive, he might need allies within the department. "Let's just say I've seen similar architectures before," Raymond offered. "And similar problems." Marcus seemed to consider this. Dr. Chen is having a fit about yesterday, says Crane is undermining his authority by bringing in an outsider. He grinned suddenly. It's the most entertainment we've had around here in months. Before Raymond could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Dr. Chen himself emerged, looking surprised to find them already there. "Gentlemen," he greeted stiffly, "I see you're eager to begin the day." "Just showing Raymond some of the system diagnostics," Marcus lied smoothly, surprising Raymond with the unexpected cover. Dr. Chen's expression suggested he didn't believe this but chose not to challenge it. "Mr. Nichols, Mr. Crane has requested you join a special project team effective immediately. You'll be working directly with the Defense Division on the navigation system integration." The abruptness of the reassignment confirmed Raymond's suspicions. Crane was moving quickly to position him where he could address the Blackwing-related issues. "And which team members will be joining me?" Raymond asked. "None," Dr. Chen replied with poorly concealed satisfaction. "You'll be working alone, reporting directly to Mr. Crane. Apparently he feels your unique perspective requires isolation from our standard protocols." In other words, Crane wanted to compartmentalize Raymond's work, keeping it separate from the main engineering team, a classic security measure for classified projects. "I understand," Raymond said, ignoring Marcus's questioning look. "When do I start?" "Immediately. Gather your things. Security will escort you to the defense wing." As Raymond collected his few personal items, Marcus approached under the pretense of helping. "Defense wing? That's seriously classified territory," he murmured. "Nobody from our department gets assigned there." "Apparently I'm an exception," Raymond replied quietly. "Listen," Marcus said, lowering his voice further, "something weird is happening with that navigation system. The last simulation went sideways, corrupted data, inexplicable behaviors." Chen tried to blame it on input parameters, but Raymond glanced at the younger engineer with new interest. "But you don't think that's the cause?" "I think," Marcus said carefully, "that there's a fundamental instability in the system architecture that nobody wants to acknowledge." He slipped a small data card into Raymond's jacket pocket. "These are the original system specs, the ones before all the modifications and improvements. Maybe they'll help." Before Raymond could question this unexpected alliance, a security officer appeared at the entrance to the engineering floor. "Mr. Nichols, I'm here to escort you to your new workspace." Raymond nodded to Marcus, a silent acknowledgement of the risk the younger man had taken in sharing information. "Good luck," Marcus said, then added with forced lightness, "Try not to forget us little people when you're working on the secret squirrel stuff." As Raymond followed the security officer toward a restricted area of the building he'd never entered during his years as a janitor, he considered the strange turns his life had taken in just 4 days. From invisible maintenance worker to the center of what was increasingly appearing to be a dangerous revival of his past. The security officer led him through multiple checkpoints, each requiring higher clearance levels, until they reached a secured floor accessible only by keycard and retinal scan. The officer used his own credentials to grant Raymond entry, then departed without a word. Beyond the security door lay a laboratory environment unlike anything in the main engineering department, cutting-edge equipment, holographic displays, and workstations that made the technology upstairs look obsolete by comparison. "Impressive, isn't it?" came a familiar voice. Raymond turned to find Elijah Crane approaching, dressed immaculately as always, a tablet in his hand. "This is where we develop our most advanced systems, technologies that won't reach the public sector for decades, if ever." "It's certainly well equipped," Raymond acknowledged, taking in the space that would apparently be his new workplace. "Only the best for our most sensitive projects," Crane agreed, guiding Raymond toward a central workstation. "This will be yours. It's isolated from the main network but has all the resources you'll need to examine our navigation system." Raymond noted the isolation, another security measure, but also potentially a way to contain whatever he might discover. "And what exactly am I looking for, Mr. Crane?" "Officially, you're conducting a security review of the system architecture before final implementation." Crane activated the workstation, bringing up schematics that immediately triggered Raymond's recognition. "Unofficially, you're determining whether the fatal flaw that doomed Project Blackwing exists in our current iteration." The directness of Crane's statement confirmed what Victoria's video had suggested. "You believe the issues are connected." "I know they are," Crane said, his voice hardening. 3 test pilots died in Tehran because of a navigation system failure that was never adequately explained. Now, 3 decades later, we're seeing eerily similar anomalies in a system based on the same principles. "If you suspect a connection, why continue development?" Raymond asked, studying the schematics more closely. Why not start from scratch with a different approach? Crane's expression shifted subtly. Because the potential applications are too valuable to abandon. Imagine a navigation system that can operate independently of satellites, that can't be jammed or hacked, that provides pinpoint accuracy in any conditions. The military applications alone are worth billions, not to mention the civilian market. There it was, the same seductive reasoning that had driven Project Blackwing forward despite early warning signs. The promise of revolutionary technology overshadowing the risks. "You're talking about quantum navigation," Raymond said quietly. "The theoretical framework I was developing before Tehran." "Exactly." Crane looked pleased, as if Raymond had passed some test. "A system that uses quantum entanglement to establish positioning without external reference points." "Your original concept was brilliant, Raymond, decades ahead of its time." "And fundamentally flawed," Raymond reminded him. "Or sabotaged," Crane countered. "Which is why you're here. I need someone who understands the original architecture intimately, someone who can identify whether the flaw was inherent in the design or introduced maliciously." Raymond turned to face Crane directly. "And if I find it was sabotage, what then?" A cold smile spread across Crane's face. "Then we find out who was responsible and make sure they can't interfere again. And you, Raymond, get the chance to complete what was taken from you all those years ago." The offer was packaged perfectly to appeal to Raymond's deepest desires: vindication, the chance to clear his name, the opportunity to realize his greatest work. But beneath Crane's persuasive words, Raymond sensed something darker, an agenda beyond what was being openly stated. "I'll need complete access to all test data," Raymond said, making his decision, "including any incidents or anomalies." "You'll have everything," Crane promised. "Victoria will be your point of contact for any resources you need." As if summoned by her name, Victoria Harlow appeared at the laboratory entrance, her expression carefully neutral as she observed the two men. "Victoria," Crane acknowledged. "Perfect timing. Please ensure Mr. Nichols has everything he requires for his analysis." He checked his watch. "I have a board meeting to attend. Raymond, I look forward to your preliminary findings by the end of the week." With that, Crane departed, leaving Raymond alone with Victoria in the high-tech laboratory. "I see you've accepted his offer," she said once Crane was out of earshot. "I'm investigating," Raymond corrected. "There's a difference." Victoria approached, keeping her voice low despite the apparent privacy of the space. "Did you review the file I gave you?" Raymond nodded. "Error signature matches what happened in Tehran. It can't be coincidence." "That's what I thought," Victoria said grimly. "There's more you should know. The Defense Division has been testing prototype systems for months. 3 test drones have been lost to the same type of navigation failure. Each time, the project lead has classified the incident and pushed development forward. Under whose authorization? Officially, Elijah's, but he's been surprisingly uninvolved in the technical aspects until recently. Victoria glanced toward the door. Something changed a few weeks ago. He suddenly became intensely interested in the quantum navigation project, demanding daily updates, bringing in new security protocols. Around the same time I fixed his jet, Raymond guessed. "No," Victoria corrected. "Before that, about 3 weeks ago after a meeting with Admiral Westbrook." The mention of Westbrook's name again sent a ripple of unease through Raymond. "That's too convenient to be coincidence." "I thought so too," Victoria agreed, "which is why I started looking more closely at the project data. That's when I found this." She activated a nearby console, bringing up a personnel file. "Dr. Thomas Billionaire brought in as a consultant 6 months ago specifically for the quantum navigation project." Raymond studied the photograph on the screen, a jolt of recognition hitting him. "I know him. He was part of the original Blackwing team, one of the system architects who worked under my direction." "And now he's working for Crane Industries," Victoria said. "Or was. He disappeared 3 weeks ago. The official story is that he took a leave of absence for health reasons, but his access credentials were terminated and his research confiscated." The timing aligned too perfectly with Westbrook's meeting with Crane and the subsequent interest in the navigation system. A cold certainty settled in Raymond's gut. Billionaire must have recognized the flaw from the original project, he theorized. If he raised concerns, it might explain his sudden leave of absence, Victoria finished, and Crane's newfound interest in finding someone who understood the original Blackwing design. Raymond processed this information, the pieces fitting together in an increasingly disturbing pattern. "Why are you telling me this? You're risking your position, possibly more." Victoria's professional composure slipped for a moment, revealing a flash of what might have been fear. "Because Elijah Crane built this company on disruption and innovation, not weapons development. This project represents a fundamental shift in direction, one that several board members, including myself, have opposed. And yet it continues, Raymond observed. Under direct pressure from military contacts, including your old friend Admiral Westbrook. Victoria's expression hardened. I believe they've been searching for you, Raymond. The timing of your discovery by fixing cranes jet might seem fortuitous, but I suspect it was engineered. The implication was clear. Raymond hadn't accidentally revealed himself. He'd been maneuvered into position. You think Westbrook knew I was here, Raymond said, the realization dawning. Working as a janitor in Crane Industries. I think someone did, Victoria confirmed. And I think the electrical problem with Crane's jet was no accident. It was designed to smoke you out. Raymond thought back to the jet incident, how the problem had seemed so perfectly aligned with his expertise, how quickly Crane had accepted his offer to examine the aircraft, how easily he'd been transitioned from maintenance worker to engineer to classified project lead in just 4 days. If you're right, Raymond said slowly, then I've walked into a trap 30 years in the making. Victoria nodded grimly. The question is, what do you plan to do about it? Raymond turned back to the workstation, the schematics of the quantum navigation system glowing before him. His creation, distorted by time and other hands, but recognizably his work. First, he said, determination hardening his voice, I'm going to find out exactly what happened to the original Blackwing project, and then I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Over the next 3 days, Raymond immersed himself in the quantum navigation system, barely leaving the laboratory except for brief rest periods. The work was both familiar and disorienting, like revisiting a childhood home to find it altered in subtle but significant ways. The core architecture remained true to his original design, but layers of modifications had been added, some brilliant, others questionable. Raymond documented each deviation, building a comprehensive map of how his creation had evolved over 3 decades. On the 3rd day, while examining simulation data from the failed tests, Raymond discovered something odd, a pattern in the system failures that shouldn't have existed. Each crash had occurred under slightly different conditions, but the error signature was identical down to the millisecond. In a properly functioning system, even catastrophic failures would show variation. This perfect replication suggested something else entirely, a deliberate trigger. Raymond was so absorbed in this discovery that he didn't notice the laboratory door opening until a voice broke his concentration. Working late again? He turned to find Olivia Crane watching him from the doorway, her usual bored expression replaced by guarded curiosity. Ms. Crane, Raymond acknowledged, surprised by her presence in the restricted area. How did you get in here? She held up a security badge with a shrug. Dad's credentials work everywhere, one of the perks of being the billionaire's kid. She wandered into the lab, studying the displays with casual interest. So this is the super-secret project he's been obsessing over. Raymond discreetly minimized the sensitive data on his screen. Does your father know you're here? Dad's at some charity gala with my mom, Olivia said, perching on the edge of a desk. He thinks I'm at a friend's house for a study session. She smirked. Parental controls are so easy to bypass it's almost sad. Raymond regarded the teenager with caution. Her presence in a classified area was concerning, but her casual demeanor suggested this wasn't her first unauthorized visit. You shouldn't be here, Ms. Crane. This area is restricted for a reason. Olivia, she corrected. And relax, janitor man, I'm not going to touch anything. I'm just curious about what's got my dad so worked up. He hasn't missed a family dinner in years, but he skipped 3 this week alone. Something in her tone caught Raymond's attention. Beneath the teenage nonchalance lay genuine concern. Your father is very invested in this project. Yeah, no kidding. Olivia rolled her eyes. He's always been intense about work, but this is different. I don't know, obsessed. Like when he talks about it, he gets this weird look. She studied Raymond. He gets the same look when he talks about you. Raymond chose his next words carefully. I have experience with the technology your father is developing. So I heard, Olivia said. The staff gossip mill went into overdrive when the janitor got promoted to secret science guy. She slid off the desk and approached his workstation, glancing at the minimized screens. Is it true you used to design weapons or something? I designed navigation systems, Raymond corrected. How they were applied wasn't always my decision. Olivia considered this, displaying a perceptiveness that belied her affected teenage indifference. That's the thing about my dad's business. He creates stuff thinking about the cool factor, not how it might be used. Mom says that's why the board tries to rein him in sometimes. This aligned with what Victoria had told him about board resistance to the defense projects. Your mother is on the board? Chair of the Ethics Committee, Olivia confirmed. which is why she and Dad have been fighting about this project. I overheard them last night, something about military applications and crossing lines we agreed to never cross. Raymond filed this information away. Another potential ally, perhaps. Your mother sounds like a thoughtful woman. She's a former human rights attorney, Olivia said with a hint of pride. She made Dad sign a contract when they got married, a personal ethics code for how Crane Industries would operate. He's never broken it until now. The conversation was revealing aspects of Elijah Crane that Raymond hadn't considered. A man torn between ambition and ethical boundaries, pushed toward crossing lines he'd previously respected. Olivia, Raymond said carefully, has your father mentioned Admiral Westbrook to you or your mother? The teenager's expression shifted subtly. The creepy military guy? Yeah, he's been to our house a couple times recently. Mom can't stand him, says he looks at people like they're chess pieces instead of humans. An apt description of James Westbrook in Raymond's experience. And your father, how does he feel about the Admiral? Olivia shrugged. Dad respects him, I guess, but something changed after their last meeting. Dad came home looking, I don't know, shaken. That's when all this started, the late nights, the secrecy, the arguments with Mom. Raymond was beginning to form a clearer picture of the situation. Westbrook had leveraged something to pressure Crane into pursuing the quantum navigation project against his better judgment, possibly against the company's established ethical guidelines. Olivia, I think you should. The laboratory door slid open, cutting Raymond off mid-sentence. Victoria Harlow entered, stopping short at the sight of Olivia. Ms. Crane, she said, her professional mask firmly in place. This is an unexpected surprise. Chill, Ms. Harlow. I was just chatting with Janitor Man about Dad's new obsession. Olivia pushed off from the desk she'd been leaning against. Don't worry, I didn't touch any of the top-secret stuff. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but Raymond detected concern in her eyes. Perhaps I should escort you back to the main building. Your father would be concerned about your presence in a restricted area. Whatever, Olivia said with a theatrical sigh. I was getting bored anyway. She headed toward the door, then paused, turning back to Raymond. You know, if you really want to understand what's going on with Dad, you should talk to my mom. She keeps records of everything. It's the lawyer in her. With that parting suggestion, she allowed Victoria to lead her from the laboratory. Raymond watched them go, considering the unexpected information Olivia had provided. If Catherine Crane maintained detailed records and opposed the quantum navigation project on ethical grounds, she might be a valuable resource, and potentially a powerful ally. Once alone, Raymond returned to his analysis of the failure pattern he'd discovered. If the crashes were indeed being triggered deliberately, it raised disturbing questions about who might have access to the system architecture and why they would sabotage the project. Hours later, as midnight approached, Raymond finally identified what he'd been searching for, a subtle subroutine buried deep in the system's feedback loop. To an ordinary engineer, it would appear to be a standard error-checking protocol, but Raymond recognized it for what it truly was, a kill switch. The code was elegant, disguised to activate only under specific conditions that would arise naturally during certain operational parameters. Once triggered, it would create a cascading failure identical to what had occurred in Tehran 30 years ago, and in the recent test crashes documented in Victoria's video. More disturbing still was the signature of the code. Raymond recognized the programming style instantly. It matched his own. The kill switch had been designed to look like it was part of his original architecture, a flaw in his fundamental design. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths not just to sabotage the project, but to ensure the blame would fall squarely on Raymond Nichols. As this realization settled over him, the laboratory door opened once again. Raymond turned, expecting Victoria or perhaps Olivia returning, but instead found himself face to face with a ghost from his past. "Hello, Raymond," said Admiral James Westbrook, as immaculate in his civilian suit as he had been in uniform 3 decades earlier. "I see you've discovered our little insurance policy." Raymond stood slowly, acutely aware that he was alone with the man who had orchestrated his downfall once before. "Westbrook, I was wondering when you'd show yourself." The Admiral smiled thinly, closing the door behind him. "I must say you've led us on quite a chase. 28 years is a long time to stay hidden, especially for a man of your talents." "Not hidden enough, apparently," Raymond replied, his mind racing to understand the full dimensions of the trap he'd walked into. "Oh, we've known where you were for some time," Westbrook said casually, moving further into the laboratory. "The question was how to bring you back into the fold without attracting unwanted attention." Raymond gestured to the workstation displaying the kill switch code. This was your doing, in Tehran and now here. A necessary precaution, Westbrook acknowledged without a hint of remorse. The Blackwing project was too valuable to allow it to develop without oversight. 3 pilots died, Raymond said, old anger resurfacing, and you let me take the blame. A regrettable sacrifice in service of a greater purpose, Westbrook replied. Surely you've figured it out by now, Raymond, why we needed to control the development of quantum navigation so carefully. Why we couldn't allow it to advance beyond certain parameters. And suddenly, Raymond did understand the missing piece that had eluded him for decades. It worked, he said quietly. The core technology was viable. You weren't preventing failure, you were preventing success. Westbrook's smile widened fractionally. Always the quickest mind in the room. Yes, Raymond, your design worked too well. Do you have any idea what would happen if truly autonomous quantum navigation became widely available? GPS would become obsolete overnight. Nations would lose the ability to control or monitor movement within their borders. The strategic advantage of controlling satellite systems would evaporate. So you sabotaged it, Raymond concluded, not because it failed, but because it succeeded in ways that threatened established power structures. We managed it, Westbrook corrected, allowed it to develop at an appropriate pace under appropriate control. The technology was always too revolutionary to be abandoned entirely, but too disruptive to be allowed unfettered development. Raymond thought of the 3 decades that had passed, his career destroyed, his reputation ruined, his greatest work perverted and constrained. And now, why bring me back into it after all this time? Because we've reached an inflection point, Westbrook said, approaching the workstation to examine the code Raymond had uncovered. Quantum computing has advanced to the stage where someone will inevitably rediscover what you created. We needed the original architect to help us establish the next generation of safeguards. You mean restrictions, Raymond translated. Ways to ensure the technology remains under military control. Call it what you will, Westbrook shrugged. The fact remains you're here now, working on the very system you pioneered. The system that, with appropriate modifications, will form the backbone of next-generation defense capabilities. Raymond studied the man who had shaped the course of his life so profoundly. And Crane, what's his role in all this? Elijah is an idealist with a capitalist's ambition, a useful combination. He provides the resources and infrastructure while believing he's developing revolutionary technology for the public good. Westbrook's expression hardened slightly. Unfortunately, his wife's ethical concerns have become inconvenient. We may need to neutralize her influence. The casual threat sent a chill through Raymond. If you harm Catherine Crane, please, Westbrook cut him off with a dismissive wave. We're not barbarians. There are more subtle ways to remove obstacles. A financial impropriety here, a leaked scandal there. The playbook is well established. Raymond thought of Olivia's description of her father, changing after meetings with Westbrook, pushing against ethical boundaries he'd previously respected. You're manipulating Crane, pushing him to compromise his principles. I'm helping him understand the broader implications of his work, Westbrook corrected. National security sometimes requires flexible ethics. And Dr. Billionaire, was his leave of absence another example of your flexible ethics? A flicker of annoyance crossed Westbrook's face. Billionaire became a problem when he identified the same control mechanisms you've discovered. He lacked your historical context to understand their necessity. The implication was clear. Billionaire had been removed because he discovered the deliberate sabotage built into the system. Is he alive? Raymond asked bluntly. For now, Westbrook replied, equally blunt. His continued well-being depends largely on how cooperative you decide to be, Raymond. And there it was, the threat made explicit. Help us control this technology or Billionaire pays the price. It was elegant in its simplicity, leveraging Raymond's guilt over the Tehran deaths to ensure his compliance. What exactly do you want from me? Raymond asked, though he already knew the answer. Your expertise, Westbrook said. Help us integrate the control mechanisms into the new system architecture in ways that can't be easily detected or circumvented. Make them appear to be essential safety protocols rather than deliberate limitations. And if I refuse? Westbrook's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened. Then history repeats itself. Another tragic accident occurs, more lives are lost, and once again Raymond Nichols, the brilliant but flawed engineer, bears the responsibility. The threat hung in the air between them, made more potent by Raymond's knowledge that Westbrook was entirely capable of carrying it out. I'll need time to consider your proposal, Raymond said carefully. Of course, Westbrook agreed with false magnanimity. You have until tomorrow morning. Crane has scheduled a project review at 9 a.m. I expect you to present a plan for addressing the system flaws you've discovered, one that incorporates our necessary safeguards. With that, the Admiral turned to leave, pausing at the door. It's good to have you back on the team, Raymond. Despite our complicated history, I've always respected your brilliance. His smile never reached his eyes. Just remember, some paths once chosen can't be abandoned without significant consequences. After Westbrook departed, Raymond sat motionless, the full weight of his situation settling over him. He had less than 12 hours to decide. Comply with Westbrook's demands and become complicit in the deliberate suppression of his life's work, or refuse and potentially trigger another accident that would cost more lives. Either way, Raymond Nichols, the janitor who had dared to reclaim his past, was now trapped in a game where all the rules had been written by his enemies. If you're invested in Raymond's story and want to find out what happens next, please hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us as we continue this journey together. Dawn found Raymond still in the laboratory, surrounded by screens displaying various aspects of the quantum navigation system. He hadn't slept, instead using the night hours to formulate a plan that had evolved from desperate to dangerous to possibly suicidal. The laboratory door slid open at 6:42 a.m., admitting Victoria Harlow, who appeared unsurprised to find Raymond still working. You look terrible, she observed, setting a coffee cup beside him. I'm guessing Admiral Westbrook paid you a visit last night. Raymond accepted the coffee gratefully. You knew he would come. I suspected, Victoria corrected. Security logs showed him entering the building just after midnight. I tried to warn you, but communications to this lab were mysteriously disabled. Of course they were, Raymond muttered, taking a long sip of the much-needed caffeine. Westbrook doesn't leave details to chance. Victoria pulled up a chair, speaking in low tones despite the apparent privacy. What did he want? Raymond briefly outlined his conversation with the Admiral, the confirmation that the Tehran incident had been deliberate sabotage, the threat to Dr. Billionaire, and the demand that Raymond integrate similar control mechanisms into the new system. Victoria's expression grew increasingly grave. This goes beyond unethical business practices. We're talking about deliberate endangerment, possible kidnapping, and military interference in civilian technology development. Welcome to James Westbrook's world, Raymond said grimly. The Admiral has always believed that the ends justify any means. So what will you do? Victoria asked. Crane's project review is in 2 hours. Raymond gestured to the screens surrounding them. I've been working on an alternative approach, a way to expose the sabotage without triggering another catastrophic failure. How? By giving Westbrook exactly what he's asking for, Raymond explained, but with a modification he won't detect until it's too late. Victoria studied the code on the nearest screen, her expression thoughtful. You're creating a false compliance layer. It looks like you're implementing the control mechanisms, but underneath. I'm preserving the original functionality, Raymond confirmed, and adding a diagnostic protocol that will document any external interference in the system. Evidence, Victoria realized. You're building a case against Westbrook. Against whoever is behind this, Raymond corrected. Westbrook may be the face I recognize, but an operation spanning 3 decades suggests institutional involvement. Military intelligence agencies, this goes beyond one admiral's agenda. Victoria's expression turned troubled. Evidence only matters if you can bring it to light. Westbrook has already demonstrated his willingness to eliminate obstacles. If he suspects what you're doing, that's where you come in, Raymond said. I need someone with access and authority who can ensure this information reaches the right people if something happens to me. Victoria hesitated, the implications of what he was asking clearly weighing on her. You're asking me to put myself directly in opposition to whatever power structure Westbrook represents. I'm asking you to uphold the ethical standards you said Crane Industries was founded on, Raymond countered. Wasn't that why you showed me the test crash footage in the first place? After a long moment, Victoria nodded. What do you need me to do? Raymond outlined his plan. Victoria would secure a direct communication channel to Catherine Crane, bypassing normal corporate protocols that might be monitored. If Raymond's deception was discovered, the evidence would automatically transfer to Catherine, who, as chair of the Ethics Committee and a former human rights attorney, would know how to use it effectively. It's risky, Victoria acknowledged when he finished, but it might work assuming Crane himself isn't fully complicit with Westbrook. Olivia suggested he's being manipulated rather than acting as a willing participant, Raymond said. Something about a personal ethics contract with his wife that he's never violated until now. Victoria looked surprised. You spoke with Olivia? She found her way in here last night before Westbrook arrived, Raymond explained. Apparently her father's security credentials work everywhere. That's concerning, Victoria said, but potentially useful. Olivia has always been underestimated, treated as the billionaire's disinterested daughter rather than the perceptive young woman she is. Raymond considered this. You think she could be an ally? I think she cares about her father more than she lets on, Victoria replied. And if Westbrook is manipulating him in ways that are causing family discord, Olivia might be motivated to help expose the truth. The idea had merit, though involving a teenager in such a dangerous situation gave Raymond pause. Let's keep that as a contingency for now. Focus on establishing the secure channel to Catherine Crane. Victoria nodded, standing to leave. I'll have it in place before the project review. Be careful, Raymond. Westbrook didn't rise to his position by underestimating his opponents. After she departed, Raymond returned to finalizing his deceptive code implementation. The solution was elegant in its simplicity, a facade that would satisfy surface-level inspection while maintaining the true capabilities of the system beneath. If successful, it would not only preserve his life's work, but provide documented evidence of the deliberate sabotage that had derailed his career and cost 3 pilots their lives. At 8:45 a.m., Raymond saved his work and prepared for the project review. He had just shut down his primary workstation when the laboratory door opened once more. Expecting Victoria returning with confirmation of the secure channel, he was surprised to instead find Elijah Crane himself entering the lab. Raymond, Crane greeted him with unusual formality. I thought we might have a word before the review. Raymond noted the tension in Crane's posture, the carefully controlled expression that suggested internal conflict. Of course, Mr. Crane. Crane moved further into the laboratory, glancing at the displays still showing aspects of Raymond's work. I understand Admiral Westbrook paid you a visit last night. He did, Raymond confirmed, watching Crane closely for his reaction. And I imagine he made his expectations clear regarding the direction of this project. Raymond decided to test the waters. He suggested that certain limitations might be necessary for national security purposes. Crane's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, well, the Admiral has strong opinions about how civilian technology should interface with military applications. He paused, seemingly choosing his next words carefully. I founded Crane Industries on the principle that innovation should benefit humanity broadly, not be restricted to serving narrow interests. A commendable philosophy, Raymond observed, though sometimes difficult to maintain when powerful entities have different priorities. Crane's gaze sharpened. Are you speaking from experience, Mr. Nichols? I designed the original quantum navigation system with similar ideals, Raymond acknowledged. The technology was meant to democratize positioning systems, to create navigation capabilities that couldn't be controlled or disabled by any single government or entity. And instead it became classified and controlled, Crane said, nodding slowly, a familiar pattern in technological development. Raymond studied the billionaire, trying to determine where his true allegiances lay. Your wife is chair of the ethics committee, I understand. How does she view the current direction of the project? The question clearly struck a nerve. Crane turned away, moving to one of the windows overlooking the Crane Industries campus. Catherine has concerns. She believes we're crossing lines that compromise our founding principles. And you, Raymond pressed. What do you believe, Mr. Crane? For a long moment, Crane remained silent, staring out at the empire he had built. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, stripped of its usual commanding tone. I believe I've allowed myself to be maneuvered into a position I never intended to occupy, he admitted. Westbrook approached me 6 months ago with what seemed like an extraordinary opportunity, the chance to develop a revolutionary navigation system with both civilian and military applications. The potential was enormous, both financially and in terms of technological advancement. But there were strings attached, Raymond guessed. Crane nodded grimly. Increasingly so. What began as a collaborative development has gradually transformed into something else entirely, a classified project with restricted civilian applications and expanded military capabilities. And when you've pushed back, subtle at first, funding delays for other projects, regulatory hurdles appearing mysteriously, competitors suddenly gaining advantages they shouldn't have had. Crane turned back to face Raymond. 3 weeks ago, the pressure became more direct. Westbrook presented me with information about certain financial irregularities that, if made public, would not only damage Crane Industries but potentially result in criminal charges. Blackmail, Raymond said flatly. Were the irregularities real? Manufactured, Crane replied. But convincingly so. The kind of financial manipulation that would require months of forensic accounting to disprove, during which time the damage would be done. The pattern was familiar, Westbrook identifying leverage points and applying pressure precisely where it would be most effective. With Raymond, it had been the threat to Rayonneur's life and the specter of another fatal accident, with Crane, financial and reputational ruin. So you complied, Raymond concluded. I adjusted course, Crane corrected, some of his natural authority returning to his voice. I accelerated the project as demanded, but I also began looking for leverage of my own. A thin smile appeared. That's when Admiral Westbrook mentioned a brilliant engineer who had once led the original development of quantum navigation technology, a man who had disappeared after a classified incident. Raymond understood now. You've been looking for me. For someone with your specific expertise, Crane confirmed. Not just to advance the project, but to understand what really happened 30 years ago, to determine whether history was at risk of repeating itself. And the jet malfunction, was that engineered to draw me out? Crane's expression revealed nothing. A fortunate coincidence, let's say. Raymond wasn't convinced, but it hardly mattered now. The more important question was where Crane's true allegiance lay in the current conflict. The project review in 15 minutes. What do you expect me to present? Officially, a technical assessment of the system architecture and recommendations for addressing the anomalies that have appeared in testing. Crane moved closer, lowering his voice. Unofficially, I expect you to tell me the truth about what's happening to my technology, Mr. Nichols, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. It was as close to an explicit statement of support as Raymond could hope for under the circumstances. Still, caution was warranted. Crane was a businessman first, with billions of dollars and thousands of employees depending on his decisions. The truth might necessitate difficult choices, Mr. Crane, Raymond warned. Choices with significant consequences for you and your company. Crane straightened, his full executive presence reasserting itself. I did not build Crane Industries by avoiding difficult choices, Mr. Nichols. I built it by making the right ones even when they came at a personal cost. He checked his watch. We should head to the conference room. Admiral Westbrook does not appreciate tardiness. As they left the laboratory together, Raymond felt the weight of 3 decades of secrecy and misdirection pressing down on him. In 15 minutes, he would either expose a conspiracy that had shaped his entire adult life or become complicit in its continuation. Either way, the consequences would extend far beyond his personal vindication. The future of quantum navigation, a technology with the potential to fundamentally alter global power structures, hung in the balance. The clock was ticking once again. The conference room on the top floor of Crane Industries Research Building offered a panoramic view of the city's skyline, though none of the 8 people seated around the polished table seemed interested in the vista. All attention was focused on Raymond as he concluded his presentation. To summarize, he said, advancing to the final slide, the system failures we've observed share a common signature that points to a deliberate control mechanism embedded in the core architecture. This mechanism activates under specific operational parameters, creating a cascading failure that appears to be a design flaw, but is, in fact, an intentional feature. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Admiral Westbrook, seated directly across from Raymond, maintained an impassive expression, though his eyes had narrowed slightly at Raymond's careful choice of words. Beside him, 2 military officers Raymond didn't recognize exchanged glances. Elijah Crane sat at the head of the table, his face betraying nothing of their earlier conversation. Victoria Harlow was positioned near the door, tablet in hand, ostensibly taking notes, but in reality monitoring the secure channel she had established to Catherine Crane as promised. Dr. Chen and 2 senior engineers from the Defense Division completed the group, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension as they processed Raymond's revelations. A deliberate control mechanism, Westbrook finally repeated, his tone carefully neutral. That's quite an accusation, Mr. Nichols. Are you suggesting someone intentionally sabotaged this project? Not just this project, Raymond replied, meeting Westbrook's gaze steadily. The original Blackwing project as well. The error signatures are identical, which cannot be coincidental given the 3 decades between implementations. Westbrook's smile was cold. Perhaps the flaw is in the fundamental design approach, a limitation of quantum navigation itself rather than deliberate interference. It was the response Raymond had anticipated, shifting blame to the technology rather than acknowledging the sabotage. He advanced to a new slide that hadn't been part of his prepared presentation. "This is the control mechanism isolated from the surrounding code," Raymond explained, highlighting a section of the display. "Note the signature elements here, here, and here. Now compare them to my original design documentation." He split the screen to show his authentic work beside the sabotaged version. "The control mechanism has been deliberately designed to mimic my coding style, creating the impression that it's an integral part of the original architecture. But there's one problem. These control elements address quantum computation methods that didn't exist when I designed the original system." The technical evidence was irrefutable to anyone with sufficient expertise, which included everyone in the room except perhaps Crane himself. Raymond watched understanding dawn on the faces of Dr. Chen and the defense engineers, followed by professional outrage. "This is intentional sabotage," Dr. Chen said, leaning forward to study the code more closely. "Sophisticated and deeply integrated, but unquestionably deliberate." Westbrook's expression hadn't changed, but Raymond detected a subtle shift in his posture, the tension of a predator preparing to strike. "An interesting theory," the Admiral said smoothly. "Presupposes that someone with intimate knowledge of both the original Blackwing architecture and our current implementation had the opportunity and motivation to insert this control mechanism, as you call it." "Someone exactly like me, you mean?" Raymond countered, addressing the implicit accusation. "Except for one detail, I've only had access to this system for 3 days. The control mechanism has been present in every test iteration for the past 6 months, according to the logs." He advanced to another slide showing the chronology of system tests, each one containing the sabotage signature. "Unless you're suggesting I've been secretly accessing Crane Industries' classified systems while working as a janitor, the timeline makes it impossible for me to have implemented this code." The military officers were now watching Westbrook rather than Raymond, their expressions suggesting this revelation was news to them as well. The Admiral maintained his composure, but Raymond could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, assessing damage control options, alternative narratives, potential scapegoats. "If not you," Westbrook said carefully, "then who would have both the capability and motivation to implement such a mechanism?" It was the opening Raymond had been waiting for. Someone who wanted to ensure quantum navigation remained controlled and limited rather than becoming a democratizing technology. Someone who saw its potential to disrupt existing power structures. Someone who was present for both the original Blackwing project and its current iteration. All eyes turned to Westbrook, who met the implicit accusation with a dismissive chuckle. "Are you suggesting I personally inserted this code? I'm hardly a systems engineer, Mr. Nichols." "No," Raymond agreed. "But you had access to those who were." Including Dr. Thomas Billionaire, who worked on both projects and who mysteriously took a leave of absence 3 weeks ago after raising concerns about system anomalies. Westbrook's expression hardened. "This is veering into conspiracy theory, Mr. Crane," he said, addressing Elijah directly and ignoring Raymond entirely. "I understood this meeting was to address technical issues, not engage in baseless accusations." Crane had remained silent throughout the exchange, his fingers steepled before him as he absorbed the information being presented. Now he straightened in his chair, assuming the full authority of his position. "What interests me, Admiral," he said in the measured tone of a man choosing his words with extreme care, "is that Mr. Nichols has presented compelling technical evidence of deliberate sabotage, while you have offered only deflection and dismissal." "I'm not a technical expert," Westbrook replied stiffly. "I can't be expected to evaluate code-level evidence on the spot." "Then perhaps we should adjourn to allow you to consult with your technical team," Crane suggested with dangerous politeness. "Although I must say your lack of surprise at these revelations is noteworthy." The underlying accusation hung in the air. Westbrook's expression remained composed, but Raymond detected a flicker of calculation in his eyes, the look of a man reassessing his position and exploring contingency plans. "Before we adjourn," Raymond interjected, "there's one more aspect of the control mechanism I should highlight." He advanced to a final slide showing a more detailed analysis of the sabotage code. "The mechanism doesn't just create system failures. It also transmits operational data to an external receiver before initiating the cascading failure." This revelation clearly caught Westbrook off guard. His composure slipped for a fraction of a second, enough for Raymond to know he'd struck an unexpected vulnerability. In other words, Raymond continued, pressing his advantage, this isn't just sabotage, it's espionage. The control mechanism has been exfiltrating Crane Industries' proprietary technology to an unknown third party. The conference room erupted into controlled chaos, Dr. Chen demanding details of the data transmission, the defense engineers conferring urgently, the military officers leaning toward Westbrook with expressions of controlled alarm. Crane cut through the noise with a sharp command. Enough! The room fell instantly silent. Admiral Westbrook, I believe you owe us an explanation. Westbrook had recovered his composure, his expression once again unreadable. This is clearly a complex technical situation that requires careful analysis. I suggest The conference room door opened abruptly, interrupting whatever carefully crafted response Westbrook had been formulating. Catherine Crane entered, a tablet in one hand and a flash drive in the other, her expression that of a prosecutor who had just received damning evidence. I apologize for the interruption, she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. But I've received information relevant to this discussion that cannot wait. Elijah looked surprised by his wife's appearance but quickly masked it. Catherine, I wasn't aware you were in the building today. I wasn't planning to be, she replied, taking the empty seat beside him. But when Victoria forwarded me the evidence Mr. Nichols has uncovered, along with some additional context, I felt my presence as Ethics Committee Chair was required. Raymond glanced at Victoria, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. The secure channel had worked. Catherine had received the full documentation Raymond had prepared overnight, not just the sanitized version he'd presented in the meeting. Westbrook's expression had darkened at Catherine's entrance. Mrs. Crane, with all due respect, this is a classified project review. Unless you have the appropriate clearance, I have every clearance required to oversee ethical compliance in all Crane Industries projects, classified or otherwise, Catherine cut him off coolly. It's written into our corporate charter and our contract with the Department of Defense, a contract you signed, Admiral. She turned to address the room at large. What Mr. Nichols has discovered goes beyond technical sabotage. The data transmission component he identified has been sending information not to a third party, but directly to a classified server at the Pentagon. This revelation sent another ripple of surprise through the room. Westbrook's military colleagues were now staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to anger. Furthermore, Catherine continued, I've been conducting my own investigation into certain pressure tactics being applied to Crane Industries in recent weeks, including manufactured financial improprieties designed to coerce my husband into compromising our company's ethical standards. Westbrook's mask of composure finally cracked. These accusations are both unfounded and dangerous, Mrs. Crane. You're veering into matters of national security that you cannot possibly understand. On the contrary, Catherine replied, her voice hardening. I understand perfectly that you've been using national security as a shield for what amounts to corporate espionage, blackmail, and the deliberate endangerment of human life. She placed her tablet on the table, turning it so everyone could see the screen, including the current detention of Dr. Thomas Billionaire against his will. The tablet displayed security footage of Billionaire being escorted from the Crane Industries building by men in suits, followed by images of him in what appeared to be a secure facility, date stamped just 2 days earlier. Where did you get this? Westbrook demanded, the first hint of genuine alarm breaking through his controlled demeanor. From me, came a new voice from the doorway. All heads turned to find Olivia Crane standing there, phone in hand. Dad's security credentials work everywhere, remember, including the Pentagon's visitor management system. Turns out they keep really detailed logs of who goes in and out, even unofficial visitors to undocumented facilities. The teenager stepped into the room, her usual affected boredom replaced by focused determination. Mom taught me about digital forensics last summer, said it might come in handy someday. She looked directly at Westbrook. She was right. Raymond watched as the carefully constructed edifice of Westbrook's operation began to crumble. The Admiral's military colleagues were now physically distancing themselves from him, a telling sign that they were preparing to disavow any knowledge of his actions. This is a misunderstanding, Westbrook tried, addressing Crane directly. The monitoring of your quantum navigation system was a standard security protocol, nothing more. As for Dr. Billionaire, he's participating in a voluntary debriefing related to his security clearance. Against his will, in a facility that officially doesn't exist, Catherine challenged. I've already filed an emergency habeas corpus petition with 3 different federal judges. By this afternoon, that voluntary debriefing will be subject to judicial review. Crane finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had made his decision. I think we've heard enough, Admiral. Our contract with the Department of Defense does not authorize espionage against Crane Industries, nor the sabotage of our technology, nor the coercion of our executives. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. This project is hereby suspended pending a full investigation. I'll be speaking directly with the Secretary of Defense this afternoon. Westbrook also rose, his expression now openly hostile. You're making a serious mistake, Crane. There are aspects to this situation you don't understand. I understand enough, Crane replied coldly. Security will escort you from the building. Your credentials have already been revoked. As if on cue, 2 Crane Industries security officers appeared in the doorway. The military officers who had accompanied Westbrook were already gathering their materials, clearly eager to distance themselves from what was rapidly becoming a career-ending disaster for the Admiral. This isn't over, Westbrook said quietly to Raymond as he passed. Some games have longer endgames than others. Raymond met his gaze steadily. The difference is, this time I'm not playing alone. After Westbrook and his increasingly uncomfortable colleagues had been escorted out, the conference room fell into a stunned silence. Dr. Chen and the defense engineers were studying the technical evidence Raymond had presented, their professional outrage evident in their hushed conversation. Crane turned to Raymond, his expression a complex mixture of vindication and concern. It seems I owe you an apology, Mr. Nichols. When I brought you into this project, I had no idea of the depth of deception involved. I think we were both being manipulated, Mr. Crane, Raymond replied. The question now is what happens to the quantum navigation system. Crane glanced at his wife, some unspoken communication passing between them. That depends partly on you, Raymond. It's your design at its core. What do you believe should happen to it? It was a question Raymond had been considering since he first discovered the sabotage. 3 decades ago, his vision had been of a technology that democratized positioning systems that couldn't be controlled or disabled by any single entity. That vision had cost him his career and nearly his life. The core technology should continue development, he said finally, but with transparent oversight and ethical guardrails. The potential benefits are too significant to abandon because of Westbrook's interference. Catherine Crane nodded thoughtfully. I agree, but with conditions. Any military applications would need to be developed separately from civilian uses with clear ethical boundaries established from the outset, and rigorous security protocols to prevent future sabotage, Victoria added. Westbrook may be exposed, but he likely wasn't acting entirely alone. Raymond turned to Dr. Chen. The engineering team would need to understand the full history of the project, including the Tehran incident and its aftermath. Without context, they can't properly evaluate the risks. Dr. Chen, who had been regarding Raymond with newfound respect, nodded in agreement. Full transparency within the team would be essential, no more compartmentalization. As the discussion continued, Raymond found himself in a position he couldn't have imagined 4 days earlier when he'd impulsively offered to fix Crane's jet. At the center of a collaborative effort to resurrect and properly develop the technology that had defined and then destroyed his career. Olivia, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, approached Raymond while the others were engaged in discussion. So, she said, keeping her voice low, do I still call you Janitor Man, or are you officially Science Guy now? Raymond smiled, finding her irreverence oddly refreshing after the intensity of the confrontation. Raymond works fine. She studied him with unexpected perceptiveness. You knew, didn't you? When you offered to fix Dad's jet, you knew it would lead to all this. No, Raymond admitted. I just knew I was tired of hiding from who I really am. Olivia considered this, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. Well, for what it's worth, I think Science Guy suits you better than Janitor Man, though you were pretty good at keeping floors shiny. As the teenager wandered back to her mother's side, Raymond felt a weight lifting, the burden of 3 decades spent in self-imposed obscurity, denying his gifts out of fear and guilt. Whatever challenges lay ahead in resurrecting quantum navigation properly, he would face them as himself. Raymond Nichols, engineer and innovator, no longer defined by the failures of the past. Later that afternoon, as Raymond was preparing to leave the laboratory, Elijah Crane appeared at the door. A moment of your time, Crane requested, stepping inside. Raymond nodded, curious about what the billionaire might want after such an eventful day. I've been thinking about your position here, Crane said without preamble. Leading the quantum navigation project is important, but it doesn't fully utilize your capabilities. What did you have in mind? Raymond asked. Director of Innovation, Crane replied. A new position reporting directly to me with oversight of all advanced technology development across Crane Industries. The offer was unexpected and considerably broader than Raymond had anticipated. That's very generous, Mr. Crane. It's not generosity, it's pragmatism, Crane corrected. I built this company by recognizing exceptional talent and giving it room to flourish. You've demonstrated not just technical brilliance, but moral courage and strategic thinking. Those are rare combinations. Raymond considered the offer carefully. After decades of purposely limiting his horizons, the prospect of such expansive responsibility was both exhilarating and intimidating. I'd need certain assurances, he said finally. Complete transparency on all projects under my purview, no classified compartmentalization without explicit ethical oversight. Agreed, Crane said without hesitation. Catherine has already drafted new corporate governance protocols to prevent another Westbrook situation. Your position would include a seat on the ethics committee. The pieces were falling into place, a role that would allow Raymond to not only complete his original vision for quantum navigation but help shape the ethical development of other transformative technologies. In that case, Raymond said, extending his hand, I accept. As they shook hands, Crane smiled with genuine warmth. Welcome to the real Crane Industries, Raymond, the one built on innovation rather than intimidation. Thank you for the opportunity, Raymond replied. Though I have to ask what happens to my janitorial position, Crane laughed. I think we can find someone else to keep the floors clean, unless you'd prefer to maintain that as a hobby. I think I've pushed my last mop, Raymond said with a smile of his own. Though there's something to be said for the quiet contemplation that comes with it. Indeed, Crane agreed. Sometimes the most profound insights emerge when we're engaged in the simplest tasks. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Raymond. My wife insists you join us for dinner this weekend. She has quite a few questions about quantum navigation that I'm completely unqualified to answer. After Crane departed, Raymond stood alone in the laboratory, looking out at the setting sun casting long shadows across the Crane Industries campus. 4 days ago, he had been Raymond Nichols, maintenance worker, invisible to the executives and engineers who passed him daily. Now he stood poised to reclaim not just his original vision for quantum navigation, but to expand it into realms he hadn't dared dream of during those long years of self-imposed exile. The journey from janitor to director of innovation had been improbable, dangerous, and ultimately transformative, not just for Raymond himself, but potentially for the future of navigation technology and the power structures that had long controlled it. As Raymond gathered his things to leave, his phone chimed with a message from Victoria. Billionaire found safe, being released to federal marshals tonight, Westbrook in custody. Justice, it seemed, sometimes arrived late but decisively. Raymond smiled as he left the laboratory, no longer walking with the careful invisibility of a man hiding from his past, but with the confident stride of someone embracing his future. The janitor who had bet his career on fixing a jet in 1 hour had won far more than a simple wager. He had reclaimed his life's work, his identity, and his purpose. And somewhere in the Pentagon, as federal agents combed through James Westbrook's classified files, the true story of Project Blackwing was finally coming to light. Not as a failure of design, but as a testament to a vision so powerful that the most entrenched interests had conspired for decades to contain it. A vision that would now, at long last, have its chance to transform the world. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments section below. Your support helps us continue to bring you more compelling narratives like Raymond's journey from janitor to innovator. Thank you for watching.